Welcome back. 1 in 3 teachers in England, Wales and Northern Ireland plan to quit in the next 5 years, with workload and diminishing respect for the profession their main cause for quitting, according to a survey by the National Education Union. The pandemic has been a difficult year for everyone, but a particularly exhausting year for teachers. 70% of teachers surveyed by the NEU reported increased workload over the last 12 months, and 95% were worried about the impact on their well-being. The poll was published last month. Addressing the NEU's findings on teacher retention and well-being, a Department for Education spokesperson said, "We've taken a wide range of action to address teacher workload and well-being and invested millions in mental health charities to support teachers. We are also improving support and professional development for teachers at all stages of their careers." There's always a drive to recruit new teachers, but what about efforts to keep people in the profession and retain those incredible teachers we've already got? To kick off the discussion, we're joined by 2 people with personal experiences in the matter. Caroline Roberts, who retrained as a maths teacher at an inner city school with Now Teach. She previously worked in the civil service in financial service regulation. And David Lintel, design engineer, who retrained as a former science and maths teacher but left the profession after 2 years. Welcome to you both. Daniel, you decided to make the career switch into teaching from design engineering. What inspired you initially to make the jump?
I'd always enjoyed and helping people do things, to do more than they thought they could. And I'd spent many years wondering about teaching. I'd dabbled in various bits and pieces in the past and just decided, turned 40 and I thought, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it and I'll always wonder. So I took the plunge and went and visited a school and found it very engaging and thought, yes, I think I can make a difference. So it was that sort of motivated me. So
you did the training, and then you started at your first school. Tell me a bit about that experience and how it compared to what your expectations were.
The training year was much tougher than I was expecting. I'd never had a problem sort of standing up in front of people or communicating, but suddenly when you're in front of a full class of students and you have all the expectations from both the sort of teaching standards but your own expectations in terms of communicating to them and helping them learn, it's a fairly daunting prospect. I expected it to be hard, but I didn't expect to be working as many hours as I was. I perhaps had underestimated all the sort of peripheral things that are expected of teachers, the sort of the phoning of parents, all of the planning and all those things. And I assumed I would get on top of those things and that I would, in due course, learn how to manage them. But it just felt relentless and all-consuming, frankly.
Caroline, what about you? Well, why did you career switch from the civil service into teaching maths?
Well, I felt I'd achieved everything I wanted to do in my career. It was great. It'd been busy. I brought up 4 children. It'd been quite full on. But I reached a point when I thought I sort of got a bit bored. There was no more challenge. And I was reflecting a bit on what to do, and I trained as an executive coach. And I did a bit of coaching and realised just how much I like working with people, like helping people. A bit like Dan, helping people learn. And I got 4 children myself. They'd been through education. They'd been lucky enough to have a very good, high-quality education. And it was a bit of a feeling of wanting to give back. I hadn't really consciously considered teaching, but I've got quite a few teachers in my family tree. And I was sort of, wondering about what I might do. But somebody mentioned how Now Teach to me, which helps experienced professionals into teaching. And it was all of a sudden the penny dropped that was something I desperately wanted to do.
And what did you find when you first started teaching? Can you empathise at all with what Daniel was describing?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. The training year was massive. I had no idea it was going to be so big. There was a huge amount of information to learn about how you do teaching, and you're trying to create lesson plans to deliver all this theory, but you've got in front of you students who, if you're not doing it well, they don't do what you want. They get bored, they're confused, they start misbehaving.
Ruthless.
So it's the reality in front of you that, you come into it in a logical way. Oh, if I understand the theory, I'll be fine. Like Dan, I've been fine standing up in front of people, but they were adults. These were children. They don't have that filter.
And what about the actual workload that you confronted? Were you prepared for it?
Well, I'd worked very hard in my career, and the hours, there were long hours. I think if you're, say, in the classroom, you're teaching 20 hours, each of those lessons needs to be prepared. And at the start, you're jolly inefficient. It takes maybe an hour or 2 hours to prepare a lesson, then you've got to deliver it. There's all the homework. And during that training year, in addition to that, you've got your training provider who wants you to create a gigantic portfolio of evidence against teacher standards. And I also did a PGC. Mine was school-based training, so I was in one school for the whole year, gradually increasing my teaching load. But at the same time, I was writing assignments for the PGCE. So together, it was huge. And I think the pits were sort of March, just before the Easter holidays, when I was working long hours every day, but also putting in 10-hour shifts on a Saturday and Sunday. My family
to get the work done for the weekend.
It was.
Daniel, you did decide to leave the profession in the end, as I said in the introduction, I think after a couple of years. But do you think if you'd had more support or advice, known what to expect in the early stages of teaching, you might have stayed in the profession?
I think, if I'm honest, a lot of people gave me the picture, the true picture before I started. But like everything, I'd set my heart on it. I thought, no, I can do this. I'll manage it and what have you. So I don't think it was a lack of foresight or guidance from others. I think part of it was self-induced. I was very passionate about it. I wanted to do the best job I possibly could. As Caroline said, though, you're incredibly inefficient, and you can plan the best lesson in the world, but within 5 minutes of starting, if the wind is blowing in the wrong direction and the students have had a bad lesson previously, you have to adapt, and you've got to adapt on the fly, and it's just relentless. It's adrenaline the whole time.
Caroline, I'm laughing, Daniel, because I can just imagine. I can't think of anything worse than being in front. And these are large classes as well. How many students in a class on average?
It's going up all the time, and I think that's part of the problem. But my class sizes were typically between 24. I think the biggest class I had was 34. And unfortunately, in a classroom where the windows didn't open and it got too hot in the afternoon, and there was insufficient room for me to be able to actually even get round to the back row. So it's additional environmental pressures on top of just the physical sheer numbers.
Yeah, and children probably just wilting from the stuffiness. I can rewind myself back to those days, and I can feel my eyelids drooping as you speak. Thank you both. Stay with us. In a moment, we'll speak to two education professionals to dig a little deeper into what could be done to make teachers want to stay.
Carol Walker, tonight from 10 on Times Radio.
I'll be looking ahead to tomorrow's big stories, as well as discussing all the latest news tonight.
Join Carol Walker alongside a world-class lineup of guests, experts and contributors.
Find out what's trending on social media, and from 11 o'clock we'll go across the Atlantic to hear what's happening not just in Washington, but right across the United States.
Unrivaled opinion, debate and insight.
Carol Walker, tonight from 10 on Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app and on your smart speaker, Mariella Frostrup on Times Radio.
Katie Waldegrave is the co-founder and executive director of Now Teach, which helps people from different professions make a career change into teaching. She's also a former history teacher. And Kate Clancy is a poet, teacher and author of Some Things I Taught Kids and What They Taught Me. You've no idea, both of you, how often this happens, that I get two people with almost the same name when we're doing a panel. It just sort sort of raises the bar that little bit. Katie, does Daniel's experience echo what you deem to be the picture for many newly qualified teachers?
Yes, I think it's definitely very, very full on, and that's something that with Now Teach we're endlessly sort of telling people, and expectation management and all of that. I suppose that what is also true though is that once that first bit is kind of the most sort of overwhelming bit, I guess, is over, there is probably nothing more joyful. There's no greater privilege in any job, and I think that's why we've got to get better at supporting people through those early years of the teacher training.
I mean, I can totally imagine the joy, but if you're working 60-hour weeks, and I mean, a lot of people turn to teaching because I think they, correct me if I'm wrong, they want to spend more time with their families, and they sort of see it as working well with their own children in education and so on. And then they embark on a teaching career and discover that they have no time for anything.
Yeah, I mean, the workload is definitely high, and it's interesting. It's complicated because of the holidays. We have good holidays, and actually, if you look over the calendar year, teachers work actually relatively similar to, say, police or other sort of equivalent careers, but in any given work week during term time, it's much, much higher. So there is a complication there. But as Caroline was going to say, you do get more efficient. You get quicker. My first lessons used to take me hours and hours and hours to plan, endlessly up till midnight. And you do get quicker, and you do get more efficient. And I think we're getting better as a sector at sharing resources. It's things actually one of the silver linings of the coronavirus may be that things like Oak National Academy and shared resources. There's been quite a lot of people rewrite teachers across the country reinventing the wheel, and it's one of the things now teachers coming from other sectors often comment on is goodness, there's an awful lot of reworking similar material across the country happening.
Kate, if it's such a brilliant job, which I'm getting the sense people think it is, why do you think so many teachers are leaving?
Well, I think you have to look at why has this job got worse? Because a lot of the things that Daniel was saying have always been the case. I think, my PGCE year when I learned to be a teacher was the worst year of my life, except for having my first child. It was the most overwhelming. I've never been through anything quite like that again. But that's always been the case. I think we're struggling with retention now because we're in a cycle of underpayment. I think almost all of the problems that people are talking about now could be solved with more resources. I mean, teaching is under-resourced at every level. Every classroom is overcrowded because we haven't got enough teachers, we haven't got enough teaching assistants, we haven't got enough special educational needs people, we haven't got, and outside the classroom, we haven't got enough social work support. All of these things have been getting worse and worse and worse for about the last 15 years. And we're getting to the point where, schools are significantly worse than they were.
Katie, do you agree?
And it's very sad.
I'm going to respectfully disagree, actually, with Kate, who I admire hugely. But on this one, I think that it's money could solve or improve a lot of things. I don't doubt that. But I think the key thing is where one would put that money. And we lose teachers kind of at two main points. We lose them in those early years, as we were discussing. And we often lose them when they have children or when they need to work flexibly or part-time for some reason. And so we at Now Teach that those first few years of support are crucial, and it's something we do for our Now Teachers. But the government is doing the new early years career framework will slightly extend the period of time in which you have a bit of a reduced timetable and that you've given a mentor and so on, which I hope will help. And the second thing is I think schools are beginning to become, and more work needs to be done on this, but to work more flexibly. Most of us won't want to work part-time for most of our careers, but most of us will want to work part-time at some point. And we lose teachers, and it is still quite a female teaching force. We lose teachers when they have babies, and the more that we can do to make sure, there's some statistic, it's something like 45% of working women work part-time in this country, but only about 25% of teachers. And if we can support schools, and there's lots that's being done that's good in that perspective, then I think people will also stay.
I'm glad you mentioned, sorry, Kate.
They can't afford a house, though. I mean, that's my experience with my colleagues, that they need a roof over their head when they're 30, so they leave teaching.
No, absolutely. And I'm not suggesting that if everyone went part-time, that clearly doesn't work. But if such a different proportion of women in the normal working world and the rest of the working world, if you like, are going part-time for some period, and teachers can't or struggle to, that seems to me problematic. And I think schools are better at it now.
But I think what Kate's saying is that they're badly paid anyway, so they can't probably afford to go part-time. I mean, if you're already badly paid as a full-time worker. And I'm interested, if we compare our education system to that of Finland, I know we always end up, talking about Scandinavia in these discussions, but in Finland they have no national examinations or rankings except for one final exam in high school. Their education system is hugely respected. Teachers are some of the best paid employees in the country and enormously valued in their culture. Do you really think that we're at that point here, Katie? Or do you think we could do a bit of work in terms of elevating the standing of teachers, both financially, but also with respect?
I agree. No, and clearly we're not is. And it's interesting. I think management and so on is a huge part of this, Norway, for example, is good not only at part-time but flexible working, the sort of trust element. And I hope and believe that as the workforce becomes more diverse, I mean, I think if you can bring in more people like Caroline, more experience from other sectors, that you could actually think about how we hold on to people in the way that other sectors perhaps are better at doing, and indeed other countries, as you say, Norway and places.
What about the pressures? Kate, just hold on a second. What about the pressures that government put on teaching and teachers and indeed the school system? And I always imagine that if I did a job where every 5 years someone came in and said, right, clear the decks, we're going to do this a completely different way, and that happened on a regular basis, I'd get pretty fed up with it and dispirited.
That is huge. I can hear we're finally agreeing, and I don't disagree fundamentally with them. But I do think.
Let me just bring Kate in there for 1 second, Katie. Sorry.
I do think fundamentally education is used as a political football, and that's why I was saying money to start with, because it's so much cheaper to introduce a new ideology or a new initiative, and governments tend to do that. They say, right, we'll have academies, we'll have these trusts, we'll do this to the structures of teaching, or we'll have a new curriculum, we'll have lots of exams, and all of those, and they don't put in the investment behind it. And that it is very disruptive and it's exhausting. I mean, things like the Gove reforms have exhausted teachers, especially in the primary sector.
Katie?
Yes, I think crucial to any professions is that we don't keep on redoing things, adding in new initiatives, changing. You've got to stick with and therefore give teachers the trust, give people the trust to get on with doing what they are experts in.
Do you think that the education system should be run by somebody outside of the sort of political sphere, so that it would be something that had a little more, that didn't change so often, and that therefore was something that people could invest their energies in, knowing that things would remain the same despite whoever's in government?
Oh, it's a good question. I don't honestly know, but to me that sounds potentially like yet another sort of change of the whole system. I don't have the evidence for this, but I suspect that most countries it's the government fundamentally that runs it, and ultimately what must happen is that they must then leave the system alone as much as possible to get on with being good at it. It's the constant changes that are troublesome.
That's what happens.
Sorry, Kate, briefly.
It's quite striking in Finland that's what happens. So the government pays for the schools and the schools are there and the schools are small, but there's remarkably little interference or change in the actual curriculum, which is set by teachers, and there are many fewer exams. And that seems to work, so that the teachers have the autonomy and the authority to decide what they want to do.
Just finally, because as always we're running out of time, I wondered, Daniel and Caroline, if you could both just give me in a sort of sentence what you think would change the dynamic and make teachers perhaps want to stay in their jobs. Daniel, you first.
Okay, I think for me, Kate hit the nail on the head about increased resourcing. It's not necessarily paying them more, but giving teachers the space and the time to teach, and not all the other bureaucracy that goes alongside it all.
Caroline?
Well, I am staying in teaching. It is the most wonderful career I've ever had. I simply love it. What works for me is being in a supported school which provides ongoing high quality training. and colleagues that are great to work with, and that motivation of enthusiastic children who want to learn, who actually thank me for lessons. So it really is a wonderful job. There are challenges, but if you stick at it, it really is something quite amazing.
And on that optimistic note, I'm afraid that's where we need to end this discussion. Thank you all so much for joining me. Kate Clancy and Katie Waldegrave, Daniel Lintel and Caroline Roberts. Thank you.